What are the common pawn structures in the King's Indian attack? Have you ever wondered how pawn structures shape the game in the King's Indian attack? Let's break it down so you can understand the key elements at play. The King's Indian attack is a flexible opening for white, leading to specific pawn formations that influence strategies and piece positioning. White typically places pawns on d3, e4, and often c3. The f-pawn usually advances to f4 to support a kingside attack. Additionally, moving the g-pawn to g3 is common to fianchetto the bishop on g2. This setup gives white a solid yet dynamic formation, controlling important central squares while preparing for a potential offensive on the kingside. The pawn on e4 is vital for controlling the center, usually backed by d3 for added stability. The f-pawn push to f4 is a key move, challenging black's central control and opening lines for an attack. The g3 pawn not only supports the bishop on g2 but also helps control the f4 and h4 squares, which are crucial for white's safety and attacking plans. Now, how does black typically respond? Black often adopts a structure similar to the King's Indian defense, placing pawns on d6, e5, and sometimes c5. This setup aims for counterplay in the center and on the queen side. Black's pawn structure is compact yet flexible, preparing for breaks like moving the f-pawn to f5 or the c-pawn to c5 to challenge white's center. When we look at common pawn structures, we see that a closed center with d3 and e4 allows white to build a stronghold while gearing up for a kingside attack. This often involves developing knights to f3 and d2 and sometimes playing h3 to secure the kingside. The pawn chain from d3 to e4 to f4 supports an aggressive stance, aiming to launch attacks against black's king, especially if black castles short. The fianchettoed bishop on g2 provides solid control over the long diagonal, supporting central and kingside pawns. However, it can also create weaknesses on light squares that white needs to protect. As for strategic plans, white often prepares the f to f4 pawn break to gain space and open lines for an attack. Meanwhile, black counters with moves like c5 or f5 to undermine white's center and create counterplay. Understanding these pawn structures helps players anticipate typical plans, such as white's kingside attack versus black's central and queenside counterattacks. In essence, the King's Indian attack features a flexible pawn structure for white, centered around d3, e4, f4, and g3. This setup supports a solid center and a potential kingside offensive. Black's structure often mirrors the King's Indian defense, leading to dynamic play where pawn breaks and piece activity are essential. Knowing these common pawn formations is key for effective strategic planning in the King's Indian attack.